SBC Media.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
SBC Leaders connects the gambling industry's top-tier operators and associations to share the best ideas, collaborate on solving the biggest issues, and push innovation throughout the betting and gaming industry. If you're an operator and want to join the discussion, visit sbcleaders.com for more information.
Betting's relationship with football has once again entered the limelight, as this time EFL chairman Rick Parry has defended English Football League clubs' sponsorship deals with betting and gambling operators. Parry stated that, "We've commissioned research, we've looked extensively, and we haven't seen any evidence that sponsorship leads to an increase in gambling or gambling harm." To discuss Parry's comments in further detail and if gambling operators still bring the same value to football clubs, I'm joined in this episode of iGaming Daily by SBC Sponsorship Director George Harborne and Insider Sport Editor Joe Streeter. George, how are you both doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, mate. I'm not too bad. Man City, we're still top of the league. Can't say the same thing for Birmingham City at the moment.
I don't
George.
want to talk about it at all. For obvious reasons.
No, I know. It's not going too well under Wayne Rooney at the minute, is it? Joe, how are you? Anything better at Man United?
We're winning at least just by the skin of our teeth. We're getting victories, but yeah, it's equally as much turmoil as Birmingham and an international break this weekend, though, so that's not fun for anyone, is it?
No, it certainly isn't. But no, so we're just diving into the comments Rick Parry made last week. He's taken an interesting stance, a different stance, I would say, on gambling sponsorship within football when it pertains specifically to the English league, the lower English leagues. So firstly, George and Joe, what did you both make of Rick Parry's comments? I'll go to you first, George.
I thought they were really interesting purely because it's probably the strongest statement that we've ever had from somebody in that kind of position. Someone at the EFL who have got that Sky Bet relationship to come out and so strongly back that relationship publicly is, it hasn't happened before. I think the way that Rick Parry has come out and spoken about it is incredibly pragmatic. He's kind of said, players will always bet, they always have done, they always will do. Just because that's going on, over there, why does that mean that what does that preclude us from doing deals over here? Which some will contest and say that there's a link there and all the rest of it, but quite clearly he's kind of saying, well, we don't think that there is necessarily, and in addition to that, we don't think that the sponsorship deals that we're doing as the EFL or as the clubs within the EFL, the 72 teams that make up that second, the third, and fourth tier of English football, those deals also don't increase gambling or gambling harm based on, as you already mentioned, Callum, the research that they've commissioned. So yeah, I think it's just interesting to see how strongly he's come out on it. We just haven't had that before.
And Joe, your thoughts on Rick Parry's comments last week? I know you read a piece on Insider Sport covering this.
Yeah, Parry's comments were fascinating. And like George said, they raised a few eyebrows because he's really stuck his head above the parapet and he's defended the obvious relationship between football and gambling. I think what is interesting and what is central to these points is that he has commissioned, him and the EFL have commissioned the research that finds no links to exposure to gambling. Sponsorship increases the risk of gambling harm. And yeah, it obviously comes as Sky Bet and the EFL extend their partnership. And he brings these points from a position of having enjoyed a really positive relationship with Sky Bet from all aspects. It's seen a lot of investment in grassroots sports as well. And it's been widely lauded for the positive impact it's had on the game and the good work that collaboration has done. I do think there is a balance to be found here, though, and nobody wants to see the EFL or football at any level flooded with betting adverts from all over the globe. But at a time of economic strain and at a time when we see so many clubs struggling, the challenges for EFL clubs are so significant. I don't think they should be denied this opportunity to tap in what is such a natural revenue stream. I mean, you know, we see the Bournemouths of the world. We see clubs rise through the pyramid. And that's a far rarer situation these days. As the gap grows, as the money in the top flight continues to grow, it's something that we want EFL clubs to aim for. And that's something that Parry alluded to. Something that should be a long-term roadmap and ambition for all EFL clubs to be able to rise through the pyramid and eventually be competitive in the Premier League. How that doesn't happen, what will stop that completely is by handicapping them, by taking away one of the key revenue streams. And we also look at clubs like Reading, who have gone from, you know, Premier League, top half of the Championship, to languishing at the bottom of League One. And they've been badly ran. But those situations will only worsen and increase if we limit the sponsorship opportunities of EFL clubs. Yeah,
you make some really good points there, Joe. And you know, relating back to the value that these sponsorship deals have for the teams in the EFL. George, I know me and you was on our gaming daily in regards to the Italian betting scandal a few weeks back, and we talked into deeper detail on the gambling market and the widespread ban of gambling sponsorships in Serie A, and how, you know, there were teams like Roma who was losing, you know, multi-millions of pounds on these deals. And during COVID-19 as well, especially, a lot of teams were relying on these. They were relying on these gambling sponsorship deals as a way to make money during a time of real economic strain. So, George, do sponsorship deals with operators become more important than ever? Did they become more important than ever during the pandemic? And do clubs in the EFL rely on them in the same degree today?
I think we actually have to look slightly before the COVID pandemic. I think for when we saw the peak of gambling sponsorships across the EFL, if you go back to maybe, I think probably is just before the pandemic, you know, 20 teens, if that's what we're going to call it. I think you could have gone through pretty much every championship club and found a betting partner of some description in there. In some instances, maybe more than one. You maybe would have had an in-stadium betting partner and then an additional betting partner, plus obviously Sky Bet with the league, and then advertisers that would have come onto the LED systems as well, and that would have gone down into League One as well. You know, with some of the bigger teams, that isn't really the case now. I think the the pandemic was a challenge, because if you remove live sport from the scenario, which was obviously what we had a pause on live sport for a while. It becomes very difficult for betting companies who are focused, gambling companies who are focused on sports books to kind of garner any value from the partnerships that they're paying for. So there was an importance in those relationships at that time, because if they were to disappear, then the revenue hit that clubs would have felt would have been significant, because they're also not getting fans through the door and all the rest of it. But I think post-pandemic, if we go from kind of the last couple of seasons, I think we're actually already seeing a decline in gambling sponsorship. The Sky Bet deal with the EFL notwithstanding, obviously that's a record deal. I think it's billed as £73 million over a 5-year period. I think £6 million of that is a specific fund to kind of tackle, to support community projects and tackling gambling harm. But, aside from that big Sky Bet investment, which is huge, and all clubs at all levels of the EFL will benefit from that from a central distribution perspective. The number of brands that are actually going and doing those club specific deals has dwindled. It's in decline. There's a couple of new entries that have come in. There's probably only one brand now that's really tried to push and do multiple deals across the Championship, and maybe with the odd one or two big League One clubs. But the availability of betting partnership inventory in the EFL now is probably as big as it's ever been. Certainly a few years ago, and again, I'm talking probably 2018-19 season, it was a genuine challenge to place gambling operators into clubs. It was a real jigsaw puzzle as you were trying to trying to make those deals work and figure out who was where and almost make sure that you could place operators into clubs where they'd be happy. But that challenge doesn't exist anymore. If an operator wanted to come and pick up a deal now, they could find one relatively easily, which is a state of kind of where that's at the moment. I think a big part of that is the UK government review into gambling legislation and the rest of it. That white paper, as we know, because I think SBC we reported on that can being kicked down the road for a significant amount of time. That would have hung heavy as well over the industry, because it just meant that people couldn't really invest in these partnerships with confidence. Now that we know what that looks like and we know what the impact of that is, maybe we'll see an increase and people will start to get a bit more confidence in the market to do these sponsorships again. I certainly don't think we're going to see any sort of ban on sponsorship in the UK anytime soon. I know for sure that the EFL only entered into their renewal with Sky Bet after government consultation as well. So they knew that the government wasn't going to, that they didn't try and quickly rush through a renewal with Sky Bet and then hope the government didn't take it away. They went through the proper channels to make sure that, this deal wasn't going to be something that was going to be viewed upon as negative, or was going to be, someone was going to try and unwind it X number of months after it had been announced and signed. So that at least to me shows that while Sky Bet has got the title partnership over at the EFL for the next 5 years, that nothing's going to be changing. And maybe during that period we'll see another uplift in gambling operators aligning with clubs through the pyramid. But I think just to go all the way back to the entry point of the key crux of the question, League Two has never really had an abundance of gambling partners, and I don't think it ever will, because the media focus isn't there from a TV perspective. There's not many live games on in that league. Championship is where the majority of the live games take place for the EFL. So you'll always see a good number of, and they tend to be the bigger clubs, right? So you'll always see a bunch of gambling operators in there. And then League One tends to be, the title challengers or the kind of the big clubs that are in that league. But yeah, at the moment, it's declined in the last couple of years since the pandemic. But let's see what happens over the next few years now that we know that there isn't going to be any ban on sponsorship.
Well, it's really quickly. I wanted to get your opinion on something. Obviously, we do see clubs in League One occasionally agree more localised partnerships with betting operators. We've also seen a betting-wide partnership for the non-league pyramid. I wanted to get your opinion on where the value is in both of these, obviously two very different types of partnership. But where is the value in partnering with League One clubs for operators? Is there any value in it at all, or is it more to attract that local market? Why do they take part? And also the value in sponsoring the non-league as well. That's a fascinating one.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. I think from League One and League Two, absolutely, they've got communities that are genuinely engaged and love their team. So I think if the fan base is strong enough and the investment into the team is of the right level, then you can probably quite quickly start to make a decent case for a return on investment. Plus, it's about confidence. It's about trust in the brand and all those other kind of intangible elements that we talk about from time to time. And again, the awareness piece is there, but just kind of less. So it depends what rights make up a deal. If they're on the front of a shirt, then yeah, you're going to be seen. If you're not, then it becomes very much more about a local engagement play. With the teams kind of outside the championship. But there's absolutely value there. But the value has to go both ways. That the rights fee needs to reflect the size and everything else, and what the club can deliver meaningfully to the partner. From a National League perspective, I guess there's a couple of things here. Like the National League, it gives you access to communities all over the country, and you've got to remember the National League is made up again of 3 divisions of football. So you've got the National League itself, and then you've got the Northern League and the Southern League that feed into that National League, the step below that. So there's a lot of clubs represented across a really broad kind of swathe of the country, and there's a whole different narrative that you can create and play with when it comes to the National League. It's almost like proper football, if that makes sense. It's kicking a lump out of each other, and not to do it a disservice because the quality of the National League has come on significantly in recent years. I think the other thing, and I know this from an operator that I spoke to, this is a few years back, but they saw a huge value in those low league partnerships because of the SEO backlinks that it could help provide as well, which might seem like a really strange thing to raise on and as a strategy. But there was an operator specifically that said to me, we're exploring the lower leagues because, if we do a deal and we get access to 70 odd websites that make up the partnership, and our link is attached to all of them, then that has a benefit to us from an SEO perspective. So there's those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, no, that's great insight from you, George. I mean, it's great having you on the podcast to get your insight on the world of sponsorships in the game. But I'll carry the conversation on anyway, lads. I'll open this next one to the both of you. As long as clubs and operators are doing their due diligence in spreading gambling harm awareness, why do we see an increase in demands to stamp out betting and gambling promotion in football? Joe, I'll go to you first on this.
I can't answer why. I think it's because it's such a polarizing issue, really. But I do think you raise a really important point when it comes to due diligence. And I know, we're talking about the EFL today, but I think globally, I think this is vital because, we've been doing the Behind the Badge podcast where we speak to commercial people from all over the globe. I had the pleasure of listening to lots of panels in Barcelona where we heard from clubs all over the globe. And generally, and obviously we've got North America as well, which is a whole new beast. But generally, the receptiveness to gambling sponsors in different parts of the world is a lot more welcoming than it is in Europe. I'm not sure if you agree on that, but yeah, I think it's a lot more welcoming. And I think we often ask ourselves, what lessons can they learn from Europe? And I think due diligence is one, making sure that they're getting involved with the right partners that are going to, that aren't just taking a scattergun approach to sponsorship, that are actually really taking the correct strategy to sponsorship. And yeah, we have seen good examples, though, in the UK on these shores as well. I think Kindred and Rangers have some fantastic initiatives. And yeah, so there have been some good examples on these shores, but I think it's a real lesson to be learned for clubs and even operators abroad to make sure that the partnerships are right and make sure they're doing their due diligence. I sort of wanted to ask a little bit about the rise of sort of infotainment brands that we've seen in Italy, and I think that shows a sort of lack of due diligence. When we see, obviously, we have the blanket ban in Italy on sponsorship with gambling operators, and we've seen the rise of infotainment brands who then sort of act as a bypass to these regulatory frameworks. We see the branding of betting operators, even though in the form of an infotainment brand, coming across in Italy. And yeah, that's something I sort of wanted to pick both of your brains on, and what you thought of that, and if you thought that's an example of bad due diligence.
I don't think it's necessarily an example of bad due diligence. I think it's just an example of, if there's a rule there that, if there's a way around something specific, then usually someone will try and find a way around it. And I think it goes to show just how valuable these types of partnerships are, that brands are willing to take that step to try and ensure that their brands are seen by potential punters and all the rest of it. I think Italy's a unique case because in that market where, it's a regulated market, but the advertising isn't readily available, there is confusion then of, well, who is regulated and who isn't. And in many ways, the infotainment push could actually be seen as something beneficial, because if that on the basis that if that brand is a license holder in the country and is then pushing an infotainment brand, then at least punters can see this is somebody that I should be betting with, even if we can argue whether it's right or wrong. I'd probably agree with you, Joe. It seems a bit absurd, but it's there and it's happening. I think just looping back to the initial question, about kind of why is there a focus on it? I think it's just because gambling harm exists, and if gambling harm exists, then the link and the questions will always be made, and the questions will always be asked. And Rick Parry's referencing the research that the EFL have done, but there's always counter counterclaims to that and counterintelligence and counter reports that are done and all the rest of it. So I don't think it's ever a question that's going to go away. Particularly, if something is seen, then people will say, well, that's the cause of it. Obviously, we know from looking at other markets that, where sponsorship bans have been in place, and thinking particularly about Spain, because we wrote an article about it earlier in the year. There hasn't been they haven't seen a reduction in gamers and deposits and all the rest of it. I can't remember the actual ins and outs of what there hasn't been a decline of, but the evidence suggests that the ban in sponsorship in Spain hasn't resulted in a reduction in gambling. So, I guess the question then is what is the purpose of banning it if it isn't that? But yeah, I think we'll end up in a very different debate very quickly if we go down that route.
No, I actually do agree with the sentiment of data and how can we link this data from actual use cases in terms of problem gambling and gambling harm, because I think that's where a lot of things are getting lost at the moment in terms of what is causing gambling harm, whether it's just if it's standalone issues or is there multiple use cases that we can think about in terms of preventing more and more gambling harm. And that's why I kind of almost commend Parry, the way he spoke about that and the way he's willing to go into addressing direct leads backed by data and then also making it more clearer that these are just the only issues. Football, gambling promotion in football is not the only isolated issue. So I agree with that. I think you're exactly right there, Callum. I think whatever you think of Rick Parry in the comments he's made, it's refreshing to hear somebody just speak so directly about it. Yeah. Because it just gives you a different voice on the topic, and he comes from a different sentiment as well. So yeah, it was kind of refreshing to hear a different argument to the side. But yeah, boys, to wrap things up, briefly, do you both anticipate there to be a decreasing gambling football sponsorship over the next decade if we continue to see public outcry against gambling promotion within the sport? I know the Premier League are going to introduce their front of shirt sponsorship deal, but I'm just wondering if this would be something that the EFL may consider post the Sky Bet title sponsorship.
I don't think there will be. I think we're already kind of in a dip at the moment. I've kind of mentioned that already. Post pandemic, I think we're in a bit of a dip. I think there's potential that actually Rick Parry's comments, the way that the UK government review into the Gambling Act went, and the recommendations that came off the back of that, the length of the Sky Bet deal, 5 years, the steps that the Premier League have taken on the front of shirt stuff, which kind of safeguards other assets. I think as long as there isn't anything mandated by government centrally, then I think we might see kind of a growth back into these sorts of partnerships. A greater frequency of these partnerships being done again. But I don't think it declines any further than it already is, because I think it's already in a bit of a sorry state compared to where it's been in the past.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think we see less global partnerships and more of a focus on domestic betting partnerships? Or
I think we will see the global partnerships in the Premier League, as we've always done, and we'll see the domestic partnerships kind of sit outside of that. Mainly in the Championship and below. I think they're just two completely different propositions. And you were speaking of behind the badge, we had Marcus on from Burnley Football Club, and he said the same. His journey from working in a Championship environment to Burnley and then stepping up into a Premier League environment with Burnley was basically that step from national focus conversations with brands when you're in the Championship versus international focus conversations in the Premier League. And I think that'll be the same for the types of partnerships we see from the gambling industry in the UK. Yeah,
I guess the Premier League is always going to retain that sort of global status as just a leader, a real leader in entertainment, a leader in engagement. So it's always going to attract those global eyes, I guess. And yeah, as for the EFL, I tend to agree, and I think the more examples like the Sky Bet partnership and Kindred's various partnerships in the league where it's done right, I think clubs will learn from that and sort of use that blueprint.
Yeah, just to kind of add my 2 cents to round up the podcast. I mean, George has alluded to it too. I don't really see there being a decrease in gambling operator sponsorships unless, I mean, we do have a UK election coming up very soon. So unless a new government or a government U-turn happens on an outright ban on sports, not just football but sports gambling sponsorships, then I can't really see it, to be honest. And I think it will possibly, like George said, maybe increase as well over time. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have on this episode of iGaming Daily. George and Joe, it's been great getting you both on and hearing your opinions. And if you want to learn more about Rick Parry's comments, visit Insider Sports. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye for now.
SBC Media.